Shane,
Yes, sir.
can you say short song?
Short song.
Thank you.
You're not going to provide context?
We have a 3-year long running joke of anytime someone starts the track right before the song, you say short song.
Welcome to I'd Buy That for $1, a podcast about inexpensive, common, and underappreciated records that are waiting to be rediscovered. I'm your host, Shane Hartman, lead salesman of eyeglass cleaners and eyeglass cleaning accessories at I Can See Clearly Now, Incorporated.
Ooh, okay.
Damn, you just wrote that?
I just wrote that 5 minutes ago or less.
He wrote the song I Can See Clearly Now.
Yeah, and then formed the subsequent company of cleaners and
The
accessories.
eyeglasses.
Yeah.
Well, I am co-host Shane Hartman, and I will tell you tonight, 3 out of the 4 co-hosts are going to tell you their real name. One is a lie. That's for you guys to figure out.
Thank you for that, Sham Hartman. I am co-host Peter Cook, and I learned today that I have an evil doppelganger.
Oh,
Do you want to know what his name is?
yes.
It's Mr. Nash.
What?
I'm guessing no one else has seen the classic Ernest Goes to Jail,
Oh my God.
where he had an evil doppelganger named Mr. Nash. Felix.
Oh, that was good.
I'm not quite sure how it happened, but I've never seen a single Ernest movie in my entire life.
Wow.
Oh, you need to fix that.
Is it
Wow.
worth it though without the nostalgia? I just don't know.
I can't say because I don't think I've seen one in 25 years
Yeah,
myself.
I never revisited that.
Ernest P. Worrell.
All right, well, you guys revisit first, and then let me know how it is, and I'll make my final decision then.
All right, will do.
All right, that's 3 co-hosts. I said there was a 4th.
All right. Well, I am the guest co-host. Thanks for inviting me, guys. And I am the optometrist, meteorologist extraordinaire, evil alter ego of host Shane Hartman, Shane Hartman.
So there's multiple evil alter egos going on here too.
Yeah. And Sean, Shane, and Sham.
Yeah. This is great. This is a different vibe from normal.
Well, what evil record are we going to talk about now that we've all gathered together?
Well, I think the record has a different vibe from what we normally do too.
Yeah, so what I brought you guys is Johnny Nash's 1968 LP called Hold Me Tight. A lot of people think of Johnny Nash, if they know of him at all, they think of him incorrectly as a one-hit wonder, sort of a gimmick for his I Can See Clearly Now. But Nash was actually a pretty well-rounded artist, and he had a lot of hits before that, including some hits off this album. People don't talk about that, so I kind of wanted to bring in something with a different sound and introduce Nash and kind of give him a little credit for bringing Jamaican music to a broader audience. I think that for years there was a sense that Jamaican music and Caribbean music was ripe to break through into the U.S. market, and for several years record companies had tried with a little bit of success here and there to kind of make it sort of a dance craze out of, whatever Jamaica's new music was. It started kind of with Belafonte and then Millie Small and Desmond Decker. But Johnny Nash, being a guy from the U.S., he kind of gets looked over for being one of the first guys to do that. And people just think of him as sort of a gimmick artist, sort of a one-off.
You want to give him a taste of the true Johnny Nash?
Sure. Yeah, I'd love to do that. Let's kick it off with, I think It's hard to pick tracks off of here, but I think the first one, Hold Me Tight, is a good one to start with. It was a big hit for him. And yeah, let's check that out.
All right, Hold Me Tight. Is this side A, track 1?
Yes, I believe so.
Wonderful.
I don't want to hear it. No more fussing and a fighting, baby. Hold me tight. Let's let bygones be bygones. Let's think about tomorrow, girl. Our future's bright. Well, I know I was wrong, but I was just a fool, too blind to see. You were the only girl for me. Oh, but now I see the light, and everything's gonna be alright, baby. Hold me tight. Ba 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 Well, I know I was wrong, but I was just a fool, too blind to see. You were the only girl for me. Oh, but now I see the light, and everything's gonna be alright, baby. Hold me tight, girl, you know I love you. Ooh, you know I need you, and I don't mean maybe. You will always be my baby. Ba 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 ba.
That is not at all who I thought Johnny Nash was. Seeing his records and I feel like I've typically seen them in, well, really it's similar to Johnny Mathis, who we previously covered.
Very similar. Very similar.
Yeah, where I just wrote it off as Grandma Grandpa records. I don't have any interest in this, but I never had the slightest idea that he did rocksteady or reggae music.
It's funny. Once I started researching this for this episode and listening to him, I was suddenly, it occurred to me, okay, wait, I do know this guy because the first CD that I ever owned was a compilation, The Best of Reggae, that was put out by K-Tel. It was like this budget bin reggae collection, and it had Johnny Nash's version of Stir It Up on it. And my dad bought that for me after I really liked Jimmy Cliff's version of I Can See Clearly Now that was on the radio
Cool
a lot when I
Runnings.
was 13. Yeah, because it was on the Cool Runnings soundtrack. And so I thought, I'm like, hey, I like this reggae music. And so when I got a CD player for Christmas, like a Discman, that was one of the CDs that my dad bought me, was The Best of Reggae. And there it was. I went and looked it up, and sure enough, Johnny Nash, Stir It Up. So yeah, I guess most of my music listening life, I have known Johnny Nash, but not really, because that was about as far as I went with it.
How about you, Sean? Did you know much about Johnny Nash before?
Johnny Nash is one of those guys that I have just kind of a passing knowledge of from, digging through the bins for years. I always, knew his hit, I Can See Clearly Now. And I remember early on in digging into soul-related music, I had just been playing some more Johnny Nash singles and came across that song, Hold Me Tight, with Cupid on the B-side. I was like, oh, he did more reggae. And like, this is pretty good. Like, this is better than the one song I knew by him. So I think I also picked up a 45 of his version of Stir It Up and a few things here and there. So he's kind of always been someone that I had in my head, like, I should research more and figure out what the full story is with this guy. Cause I knew there was some songs I liked at the very least, but until preparing for this episode, I have not done that deep dive. So I'm excited to hear some more information that you guys have dug up.
Sean, I thought as our resident reggae dub guy, you'd be, deep into this already.
Yeah, you can't know everything, right?
Well, that's the thing about Johnny Nash is he kind of doesn't get that credit even among rabid reggae fans, because I'll be honest, like when I was a kid, I can't remember a time when I didn't know the song I Can See Clearly Now. I mean, it's just always been there. But even as a teenager, when I was really getting into reggae and Jamaican music, I think I looked at Nash as, this guy that was doing like a typical sort of outsider take on Jamaican music. And there was some lack of authenticity, but I hadn't really heard this album yet. And what actually turned me on to it was in the late 90s, there was this Bob Marley and the Wailers, complete Wailers collection that came out. And it was like a massive, like 10 CDs, spread across like 3 different sets. And it had a bunch of stuff that Johnny Nash had produced with his manager, Danny Sims, for Bob Marley and the Wailers. And so I was like, wow, this is like so different than anything else in the Wailers catalog. So kind of got me interested, and then I sort of went backwards into Nash and started discovering, wow, this guy was really on the front end of all this stuff. So this album in particular was recorded in Kingston with one of the top house bands at that time. They were called Len Tate and the Jets. They were led by a dude, Len Tate. He was a guitarist from Trinidad who actually had a huge impact on Jamaican music. If you've ever heard Train to Scaville or Desmond Decker's 007, that's Len Tate doing a lot of the lead guitar work on there. And so he was leading the band on some of these tracks, and that's why it has that super authentic sound. It's because it was authentic, But I think...
Well, that, and it was recorded at Federal Records in Kingston,
right?
Which is where Bob Marley and Jimmy Cliff recorded their very first singles.
Mm-hmm. Yep. That band is like just one of the top bands. I don't know if you guys want to get into talking about folks that played on here, but these guys are, if you look at any classic reggae record, you'll see their names. And one of the things that was frustrating about this record is you start to try to look into who played on here, and there's not a lot of information. So you kind of have to do a little bit of digging. And I actually found out that there were at least 2 different bands on here, one being the Len Tate and the Jets band, which we heard on Hold Me Tight, and another band made up of maybe some musicians from Kingston, but also some of the top, like New York Atlantic session guys, like Bernard Purdy, Eric Gell, Richard T, Chuck Rainey, guys that you all have mentioned before on your show.
Yeah, we just talked about some of those guys back on the Cheryl Lynn episode.
Right. I don't know where we want to go from here. If we want to play another clip,
let's run it back to where Johnny Nash comes from.
Don't Look Back.
Okay.
Oh, no, that's just one of the songs on here.
Ay.
Yeah, a Temptations cover, right? Okay, let's talk a bit about Johnny Nash. He's got a really interesting trajectory. As you were saying, Jeremy, a lot of people thought of Nash, especially when this album came out, they thought of him as this like teen idol crooner type who was sort of like Johnny Mathis. In fact, his record company at the time sort of pitched him as a Johnny Mathis type of singer. So this was a bit of a left turn.
He's another Johnny.
Right. But he was born in Houston, Texas. He grew up in the 3rd Ward, and he grew up in a working class family. His dad was a chauffeur, And like many people, he started singing in church, was just immediately like, people were like, wow, this guy's got it. So by age 13, he was singing on a local TV show called The Matinee. And then like a few years later, I think about 3 years later, by the time he was 16, he was discovered by this guy, Arthur Godfrey. And he had a TV show that was a nationally broadcast show that was kind of like the teen idol or American Idol of that time. A lot of famous pop artists were kind of discovered through that. So then shortly after that, he signed with ABC Records. And like you said, he was pitched as sort of a Johnny Mathis type character. His recordings were pretty straight ahead pop, a lot of ballads, maybe like a little dash of jazz and R&B there, but like a lot of string arrangements, and it was pretty middle of the road pop. His first hit was actually a cover of the Doris Day song, A Very Special Love.
But
so
I would say it's pretty important to point out his first hit was 1957 when he would have been 17 years old.
Right. He was just a kid.
Yeah.
And so he kind of continued sort of in that lane for a little bit. He did a little acting. In 1959, he was in a film called Take a Giant Step, which was a film remake of a popular play about African-American teen. And he kind of gained some traction from that. Then in the early 60s, around 1962, he met this guy, Danny Sims. And Danny Sims is a fascinating character. He could warrant his own podcast. He had ties to like the Gambino crime family in New York, and he was a restaurant owner who was also dabbled in the entertainment business as like a promoter and a booker and a manager. And he became, as I said, he was a crucial figure in Nash's career, and many other people for that matter.
Well, and like the whole reggae world.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
He sort of well, we'll get there. I don't want to spoil it. Go ahead. I'm sorry, Shane.
No, you're fine. You're fine. So basically, Nash, by the mid-'60s, he started moving into kind of some R&B flavored material. He recorded for like Argo and Cadet, which were like sub-labels of Chess. And then he and his manager decided to move to Jamaica. Danny Sims basically convinced him to move down to Jamaica and start working there. And so that's where we get this record. And basically his sound from here starts to evolve because he meets Bob Marley and some other folks. And he just starts to realize, that this music really has something to offer. And so his whole thing was he wanted to take the sound and kind of polish it and add some of those Motown production polish that would help it cross over to a more mainstream audience, which is how we get the rocksteady with the strings and stuff on top, which some people aren't that crazy about, but I think he makes it work.
He's like the reggae version of the Nashville sound.
Oh,
yeah, sort of.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you have a good track you want to go to next?
Yeah, I think the next track that I wanted to play, I want to give just a little bit of an introduction about this one because it's interesting. Nash's relationship with Bob Marley is pretty well known, but people don't realize that when he met Bob Marley, he signed the entire Wailers group, Bob Marley, Peter Tosh, Bunny Wailer, and I think even maybe Rita Marley to this production deal. So this album doesn't have any Bob Marley songs on it, which I can see clearly now. I think it has like 4 Bob Marley songs, but it does have 2 Peter Tosh songs on it. And this is one of those, and I think it's a super funky tune. I love it. It's called You Gotta Change Your Ways, and this is one of the ones with a different band, so you'll kind of get that vibe when we check it out. So this is, let's see, I have to pull the album out to look and see what track it is. Side 1, track 3.
Side 1?
You Gotta Change Your Ways. Oh, I'm sorry, side B, track 3.
Side B, track 3.
gotta change your ways for me. You gotta change your ways for me. You gotta change your ways for me, or you'll be lonely. You'll be lonely in every way. In every way. I gave you my heart, but you wanted my soul. Gave you my heart, but you wanted my soul. You gotta change your ways for me. You gotta change your ways for me. You gotta change your ways for me, or you'll be lonely. You'll be lonely in every way. In every way. Don't make love just a game that you play. Don't make love just a game that you play. Oh, you gotta change your ways for me. You gotta change your ways for me. You gotta change your ways for me, or you'll be lonely. You'll be lonely in every way. In every way. Gotta change your ways for me.
Love that Bernard Purdie on the drums there. That he was the drummer on that track, right?
I believe so. Again, I'm taking my information secondhand from that Bob Marley and the Wailers, Complete Wailers. They have a little thing where there's some sessions that were recorded at this same time, and it says band probably includes, and it has a list of players, and it's all these New York guys, but they were basically all coaxed into coming down there and hanging out. In fact, Hugh Masekela was supposedly down there too, hanging out, and played on some of the Wailer stuff, but I don't think he's on this album. But yeah, Bernard Purdie, wow, he's cooking it up.
Mm-hmm. Adding that shuffle in there that, like,
Yeah.
you wouldn't, it doesn't jump out as being like, oh, that's not reggae drums. Like, it fits in perfectly, and then when you listen closely, it's
Right.
like, oh, that's that Purdie shuffle working in there. It's just, yeah, it's great.
Well, those guys actually, they knew about reggae, even though it was really young at that time. A lot of those musicians had been introduced to it. And in fact, Creed Taylor, who you guys have talked about before, he had a real short-lived label that he was trying to promote reggae. And a lot of these same guys played on some of those releases that he put out. And actually, Eric Gale went back in the mid-'70s and did an album with some of these guys, along with some Jamaican guys. Peter Tosh plays on it, but it's straight instrumental reggae stuff, you know? These New York session guys, they obviously, yeah, they knew what they were doing, so.
Can either Shane or Sean clarify for me, is this rocksteady or is this reggae, or what exactly is the difference? Because I know those are things, but I'm too ignorant to know the difference.
That's a very hard question to answer. Rocksteady into reggae starts to get into a blurry space. Technically, I guess this would be rocksteady, but because of the things he's playing on the drums, it starts to move a little more towards like a funky sort of reggae feel. But, you know, rocksteady was a period of just like 2 years, from 66 to 68. Where you heard that, and then reggae starts to come in. But the first track was distinctly rocksteady, Hold Me Tight. This one is a little bit less. It still has that tempo. It's about the tempo of rocksteady, but there's something that makes it a little funkier, a little more syncopated.
Is that like the thing, that it's slower if it's rocksteady?
No, rocksteady was actually, slowed down from ska. But then we could do we could do a whole podcast series on this. But early reggae is actually super fast. A lot of it's very up tempo. It's some of it's even faster than ska. If you listen to like a song like Pressure Drop or Monkey Man, and you're listening to how the drums are playing. But so yeah, rocksteady was slower from ska, which came before it. And a lot of people think it slowed down even more with reggae, but that's not necessarily accurate. Sean, you have any feedback on that?
Yeah, I can pretty much just echo what you said there. The lines of some of these reggae subgenres are very, very blurry, and oftentimes would be intentionally blurred by some of the artists that are performing it. And you also get the sense that some of these genres are maybe a little bit like retroactively placed on here.
Yes.
Because especially what you're saying with rocksteady, in a lot of ways it was the transition period between ska and reggae. And then with your saying about the up-tempo early reggae songs, a part of the transition there is they're playing these ska tracks and then kind of having maybe one or two instruments are accenting like the halftime of it, and then all of a sudden it became more popular for reggae to just be slowed down in that halftime. And the other thing that I had read is that a lot of that transition in genre had to do with the political landscape of Jamaica, because this is right around the time when Jamaica had earned their independence. So there was a move in the arts community to kind of create more of their own voice and unique style, as opposed to just having their interpretation of mostly US-based R&B music. So yeah, there's a lot affecting these different subgenres and changes in this time period in Jamaican music.
All the terminology and history I know about reggae music comes strictly from being a Sublime fan as a teenager in the 90s.
Oh, God.
For me.
That was the jumping off point for so many people, though. And, at least he was, like, shouting out some legit artists, so you gotta give him credit for that, at least.
Oh, yeah. No,
I'm a little bit older than you guys, so for me, it was like, I kind of came in through, like, Bad Brains and Operation Ivy and those kind of mid to late 80s punk bands that were flirting with ska? Reggae. Yep.
Yeah, I was thinking of that.
I said it.
I was thinking of that when I was like, oh yeah, I forget the chronology of these things. I'm like, oh yeah, ska did come first, because third wave ska was a long time ago now.
I had also read that the transition from original ska into rocksteady is at least somewhat owed to the fact that the recording studios in Jamaica got better, which may or may not have had something to do. Danny Sims had sold off his recording studio in the US when him and Johnny Nash moved down to Jamaica. But the increase in quality of the recording studios in the mid-60s allowed for the bass to actually be captured well. And that's where the bass started playing a huge role in Jamaican music.
The bass definitely was a change up in that switch between styles. Like a lot of the ska players were playing, upright acoustic bass was a thing. Bass has always been a part of Jamaican music. And the thing that I've heard about this that really was like a eureka moment for me, where I was just like, oh yeah, is because everything was based around this dance hall or sound system culture, where these huge sound systems would show up to play yard parties, and they basically wanted people to be able to hear this music for as far away as possible so that they would show up. And the way to do that is to pump those bass frequencies, because that's what
carries
the frequencies those are the frequencies that travel for miles, so we can thank Jamaican music for bringing that bass into popularity. I don't know if that had anything to do with the transition. I mean, I've heard all sorts of different stories about it was really hot that summer, and so everything slowed down. That's like one theory that people always go back to is the summer of '66 was super hot, and so everything slowed down. People didn't want to dance fast. I don't know if that's true. I think, music just evolves. So
yeah, I think people started, smoking more grass and just everything slowed down.
quite possible.
It all was adding a little bit here and there. And I think there's also a lot of parallels in the early stages of hip hop and the early stages of reggae, in that, like you were saying, a lot of these early reggae hits are because they're being produced strictly for the sound systems and street culture as opposed to radio airplay. So
Absolutely.
things like the bass line and the level of bass were super important, and having those thick bass lines just work so much better on slower songs. I was actually just reading about the classic Jamaican remix artist King Tubby, and part of what is attributed to his rise in fame is that he was a radio operator and could set up his sound systems to separate the bass so it's not playing out of the same speaker, and also have the maximum amount of bass on the tracks that he was making without making the needle skip. So because he had like just a little bit louder bass than everybody else, he was able to rise up. So yeah, like the bass and the street volume are huge to the birth of these genres and the movement.
I didn't even think about that aspect of, these would have been on vinyl records, and bass has to be treated just so, or else the needle's going to jump out of the groove.
Yep.
Interesting. Found a way to make it work. And I've taken us on a dead
end.
We went way down a rabbit hole there, boys.
Yeah.
Too esoteric.
It's easy to do that when you start talking about reggae, because it's such a crazy thing that such a tiny island could produce this music that has really
worldwide culture
impacted the world. Yeah. And that's kind of why I wanted to talk about this Johnny Nash album too, because I really think it was on the forefront of bringing that sound to people outside of Jamaica.
Yeah,
and
the UK.
He gets he gets a little bit of credit, but he really should get more credit, I think.
Yeah, he was the first song you played, Hold Me Tight, was the first reggae song to hit the American charts, I read.
Right. Yeah. You know, there was My Boy Lollipop before that, which was a ska tune, Millie Small, produced by or arranged by Ernest Ranglin, a famous guitar player. But I think because Israelites by Desmond Decker came out like a year later, maybe later the same year as Hold Me Tight. But I don't think it registered with people that Hold Me Tight was a rocksteady song, you know? It had the strings, and, you know, this was before Trojan Records started putting strings on reggae records and stuff, and I think he just gets dismissed unfairly.
Also, a lot of rocksteady and everything was hugely influenced by U.S. soul music, so it would make it makes a lot of sense to have a U.S. soul artist come through and help bridge that gap from a different starting point, you know?
Absolutely, yeah.
The other thing I think is interesting with this record is actually a 4-year gap between this being released and his record before this. His first LP was 58, and he was putting out a record every year over the next 6 years. So, like, you can tell, like, he didn't just drop a reggae record to see if it worked. He moved to Jamaica and, like, learned about the culture and made connections, and then made this record.
Lived there for years. Yeah,
exactly.
Right. I think in the mid 60s, you know, he started to make a bit of a turn that was towards more soulful music. You know, he was kind of dipping more into that R&B stuff with his sides that were done for Cadet and Argo, which were released as singles, but then later put on an album after he became a huge megastar. They're like, here's this album. But one thing that I read was that when he was in Jamaica and he started really connecting with the music scene there and the musicians, he started to reconnect with his own working class roots, and that kind of took him to a different place as an artist. And I think it shows on this album, because it's good and it's soulful, and you really hear the voice that is something special.
Agreed.
Give him another special track, Shane.
Yeah, let's hear something.
Okay, let's see. All right, I would like to take this in a sort of different direction for this one. And actually, when Jeremy and I were emailing about this, and I told him the tracks that I had selected, he was happy that I selected this one, and I was glad that he was happy, because it's the only non-reggae rocksteady track on here, and it's actually just kind of a straight 6/8 soul ballad
Oh, is this People in Love?
Yes, People in Love. Man, the voice on here, if you want to know why this guy is a star, this song will just show it to you because his voice is just gorgeous. So let's check that one out.
Looks like side A, track 4.
There you go.
People here, people there. I see people everywhere. The things they do, the words they say, all seems part of a game they play. People laugh, people cry, they cheat and they lie, but love is the best thing. Love is the only thing for people. People in love. People win, people lose. People cry the blues. They work hard and have fun, but they need love when day is done. Yes, love is the best thing. Love is the only thing for people. People in love. People in love. Love is the best thing. Love is the only thing for people. People in love. People in love.
Was that recorded on the same machine that Guided by Voices recorded their early stuff on?
A little wobbly. We were talking about that during the song, how the guitar feels so raw and out of tune, and how it gives it like this DIY feel. And I was saying that's one of my favorite parts about it is just how raw the backing track feels against his voice, which is just so pure and sweet. And one of the things I wanted to mention about this one is if you guys are familiar with any of the Bob Marley and the Wailers ballads with Bob taking lead, there's a song called Chances Are.
Oh, I love
And
that
I think
song.
it's one of
Yeah.
his best vocal performances, and this has a really similar feel. And I don't know if it's the same band, but it's quite possible. I think Danny Sims released that Chances Are, after Bob Marley died as sort of a cash in. But there's some really good stuff on that record, and that's what this tune really reminds me of, that with that sort of raw backing track.
Yeah, it's very jangly and almost home recorded, the way it just like blips in with little things. But yeah, like you said, I think it really provides contrast to like how amazing his voice is. That
his voice is perfect.
Yeah, like when it's against strings and everything sounds right. And I don't think I feel like this almost accentuates it more and makes you like more aware of how good his voice is.
It kind of sounded like he was singing over a rusty old music box.
Yeah.
Yes. And I was trying to think of like somebody to compare his voice to, and I couldn't think of anybody. His voice is kind of hard to describe. It's sort of in the same range as like Ronald Isley, but it has such a different smooth texture. Everything just feels effortless. It made me think of the guy, Jonathan Edwards, that you guys just recently did an episode on, just smooth and effortless his singing is. And that's kind of what Nash reminds me of a little bit.
I mean, he got all those comparisons to Johnny Mathis, and I think that still makes sense here. And this is like, it's what Johnny Mathis would have sounded like if he'd have like gone and made some real raw record around this time period. But
he should have.
Yeah, that would have been amazing.
Yeah, I definitely wanted to get that tune into the mix because, like I said, it's different than the other tracks on there, and it really just showcases his power as just a vocalist. Yeah, there's a lot of great tunes on here. I don't know. I thought I'd mention a few. There are some tie-ins with maybe other episodes that you guys have done. I think Peter mentioned "Don't Look Back." That was a song that was made famous by the Temptations, and it was also covered by Peter Tosh twice during his career. He does a cover of "Groovin'" by the Young Rascals, or the Rascals. "Lovey Dovey," which was recorded by the Coasters and also by Otis and Carla Thomas. And then famously Sam Cooke's "Cupid," which was, I think, maybe the B-side to "Hold Me Tight."
Yeah, it was. And I think there was a lot of love for Sam Cooke in Jamaica. So him putting that track on there was very fitting.
Absolutely. It's definitely one I have an obsession with Jamaican covers of other genres, and Cupid is one that just pops up over and over and over again. They definitely have some love for Sam Cooke. A couple other tunes I just wanted to mention. There is another Peter Tosh song on here called "Love." Peter Tosh did record at least one version of. There's "You Got Soul," which was written by Nash, and there's some different versions of that on a record that he released about a year later called "Folk Soul." And then finally there's a song called "Don't Cry," which was written by Jimmy Norman. And I didn't know much about Jimmy Norman, but in looking at information for this, I found out he was a session musician and songwriter who was probably most famous for writing "Time Is on My Side."
Interesting.
Recorded by Irma Thomas and famously covered by the Rolling Stones. And he was also, and this was the part that really tripped me out, he was a vocalist on "Harlem River Drive," which was a kind of a cult classic experiment that combined like Latin, soul, and jazz. I think Eddie Palmieri was like kind of the lead force in that, but Jimmy Norman was the guy that came in and sang on that. So that was kind of a cool little factoid that I found out when I was researching this. So,
Sean, did you put together a Spotify playlist for this episode?
Well, you're going to be real surprised, but yes, I did.
Do you want to tell us what's
There's
on it?
There's a bunch of good tracks on it. Yeah, there's some really good stuff. I think people should listen to it. They're going to like the music that's on it. This is maybe one of the better playlists that I've made. Actually, a bunch of the tracks I put on here, Shane mentioned throughout the episode, so that's convenient. Or at least the artists were mentioned.
And we didn't even collaborate on that. It just happened.
There's some Desmond Decker and the Aces. I did not put Israelites. I put Itmek on there, which is like the less popular but just as good song from around that time period. I put 2 tracks from the Harder They Come soundtrack, which was another pivotal moment of reggae being popularized in the US and the UK. The soundtrack was almost more popular than the film and was a lot of people's entry point into reggae music.
Yeah, my parents had that one in their collection.
Yeah, there you go. Sweet and Dandy by Toots and the Maytals off of that. There's some Johnny Osborne on here, Marcia Griffiths. We talked a lot about rocksteady in this episode, and I have a track by the godfather of rocksteady, Alton Ellis, with his classic Cry Tough. A Third World on there for, some what was happening a few years later down the road. Winston Francis for some more rocksteady kind of soul crossover. The Heptones, Millie Small with the classic My Boy Lollipop is on there. Dave and Ansel Collins with Double Barrel. We did a premium content Patreon episode on that one. Jimmy Cliff's Many Rivers to Cross, also from the Harder They Come soundtrack. And then speaking of reggae covers of other songs, there's an Al Brown plus Skin, Flesh, and Bones doing Al Green's Here I Am Baby. Highly recommended track.
Nice.
Johnny Mathis is on there from Love is Blue, which I believe was a 1968 album as well. You can find all this and more on Spotify. Just search I'd Buy That Podcast, all one word, to find this and every other playlist that we make to accompany the episodes.
Is that how you say her name, Marcia Griffiths? I've always said Marcia Griffiths.
I don't know.
I've heard both. I think it's Marsha.
All right. I stand
Marcia?
corrected. I just guessed.
Marcia.
It could be Marcia.
Well, this has been a micro segment of For the Record with Peter Cook.
Right here, right now. I don't have to come back to it later.
I'm sure somebody will tell us if we got it wrong or right.
It's also pronounced Johnny Nash.
Oh my gosh, Peter. Oh my Lord.
Well, Shane, how about do you have anything that you would like to plug while you're here?
Yeah, I have a few things. First, I want to give a shout out to my buddy, John Gregory, a.k.a. Juan Huevos, for giving me some technical assistance on my recording here. John he's got a couple podcasts on here you can check out wherever you check out podcasts, Lurk Mode and Coronatos. And he does a podcast production for Sparse Mansion Media. I play bass with a couple bands, one band called Dynamite Brothers, another called The Old Ceremony. You can find us on the internets, including Facebook, places like that. I have a Instagram account. If you dig album art, particularly Caribbean stuff like I do, that's pretty much all I post there. It's occasionally I'll have reviews, but you can check me out there. I'm Swangin2, SWANGIN, the number 2. And yeah, that's about it.
So you're the one who left the review on this album on Discogs.
Yeah, that's me. You recognize my handle.
I was wondering if that was you, and I was going to ask anyways, and then you said the handle. I was like, that's that review I had just read earlier today.
I think it might have been the same review that I sent you guys when I was like, yeah, you should consider these albums. And I sent you some little write-ups I had done. I think that might have been the very first one.
Nice.
So.
Oh, had
Here
you
we
done
are.
those?
I'm trying to spread the gospel of this record.
Those write-ups that you sent us, I thought that you had done them exclusively for us, but they were pre-written, huh?
Yeah, I just nah, they were for you, Peter. I did them
They were
specifically just for you.
I was flattered. They were so elaborate. I was like, man, going all in.
I've got a notebook full of album reviews next to my bed that someday I'm going to show to you, Peter.
Oh, I look forward to that day, Jeremy.
Sham. I'm Sham.
Yeah.
I think I figured out who the fake name is here.
Yes. It's Sean.
It's sure.
Yeah, it's me. Only took us 100+ episodes to figure it out.
Johnny Nash put out this record and then fell off the face of the earth, right?
Well, no. Actually, his like we talked about, his greatest success was to come after this when 4 years later he released I Can See Clearly Now, and that was like, it just went stratospheric. He basically became a household name, but then after that, even though he released a couple more LPs that are really good, I would mention My Merry-Go-Round from 1973 and Celebrate Life from 1974. Both of those were on Epic, and they're fantastic, but you don't hear anything about them. Definitely worth checking out. Those show up kind of cheap as well. And he continued to release music throughout the 70s, but didn't have much commercial success, and then he kind of walked away from the music business in the early 80s by most accounts and lived out a pretty private life out of the public eye until his death actually just about a year ago.
Yeah, October 6th, 2020.
And I just want to throw out there, the version of I Can See Clearly Now that was in my head was not the Johnny Nash version. It must be the Jimmy Cliff version from the
Jimmy Cliff
Cool Runnings. Yeah. But go listen to the Johnny Nash one, because I gotta say it's better, and the bridge is
I got goosebumps,
Yeah,
man, just hearing you talk about it.
Yeah, like that bridge like actually made the hairs on my neck stand up, not just like a metaphor that people say. Like I heard it and was like, "Oh my God."
Yeah, it did the same for me, except I had shaved the back of my neck that day, so they didn't stand up.
Oh, brother. Jesus Christ, let's get out of here. What are you sending us out on, Shane?
I want to send you guys off with the Jimmy Norman track that I mentioned, Don't Cry. This one, it kind of reminds me of Desmond Decker's Israelites, not in the that it really sounds like it, but just that the music is so happy and chipper. But if you tune into the lyrics, you get like a totally different picture of what's going on here. And I think it's kind of like the perfect fusion of what he was trying to do with Jamaican rocksteady and these sort of pop soul production values. So yeah, Don't Cry. Let's hear that one.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us and schooling us on Johnny Nash. Mr. Shane.
The pleasure was mine.
I believe you are a real person. I don't think I mentioned this on the episode, but when Shane first sent a message to us, I just assumed that it was Sean doing some kind of weird joke or perhaps trying to like get undue influence by making like fake Facebook characters to like
all these fans keep recommending more reggae on the podcast.
Very
guys.
thinly veiled.
It's funny that says so much about what you think about Sean, that he would do something deceptive like that, but in doing that he would like come up with this name that was so close to his own name.
He only changed a couple letters.
Yeah, it's because I don't believe Sean is a deceptive person, so he wouldn't be very skilled at it. See?
There you go. I see you've thought about this.
Yeah, backing up the bus here. All right. All right. Well, thanks for joining us, Shane.
Thank you.
I'm co-host Jeremy.
I'm Shane Hartman.
I'm Peter Cook.
And I'm Shane Hartman.
I meant to say I'm co-host Sham Hartman. Good night from Sham Hartman Incorporated.
Don't cry, my little baby, don't cry. Don't cry, my little baby, don't cry. Daddy's gonna bring you something good. Don't cry. Yeah, Daddy's gonna bring you something real good. Sick and tired seeing my kids go hungry. See my wife homesick in bed. I gotta find a job, but finding a job is hard. Did you hear what I said? Hear what I said? Oh, don't cry, my little baby, don't cry. Don't cry, my little baby, don't cry. 'Cause Daddy's gonna something good. Daddy's gonna bring you something real good. I'm getting tired of always ducking my landlord. Sometimes you see I just can't pay my rent.